In this lesson, we're going to be learning about making selections from rosters. So take, for example, your classic household roster where you have X many members, 3, 5, 7, 10 members, and you ask some questions about each member, such as age, gender, occupation, etc. Now imagine you want to ask some follow-up questions, but these questions are only relevant to one particular member of the household, and this is based upon some condition. So you'd like to ask your subsequent questions only to the oldest member or only about the youngest child, something like this. So today's lesson is going to focus around this kind of problem and how we can return the row code, so which occurrence in the roster is the one that we'd like to look at. After this, we'll take a look at how we can return a value from the roster where the row code is known. So this is more applicable to your fixed rosters. So if you have a crop roster and you want to know the area under corn, for example, and you already know the row code of corn, this is a little easier. So we'll be covering that code as well. So we're going to jump in first of all and talk through the code and how it's going to work. Then we'll take a look at the example in our designer. The problem we want to solve today, as we said, is to select one occurrence from a roster based on some condition. For example, the oldest person in a household roster or the largest land plot in a land plot roster. We're going to talk through one specific example over the next couple of slides, and that's going to be our problem to return the row code of the oldest female in a household roster. To do this, we're going to use a series of linQ functions because, after all, we are working with a roster. So the first function we're going to learn is called where. And this function tells the query we're running which roster occurrences are eligible. This is used if only some of the roster occurrences are relevant to our search. So you can exclude the where function if you'd like to search through everything in the roster. Next, we're going to learn order by. And this function sorts the roster occurrences by the selected variable. Next, we have the function called select. And this is telling us which variable we would like to return. And finally, we have the function called toArray. And this is where we'll narrow down which occurrence we're going to return. I know that's a lot to take in, so we're going to step through it function by function with an example so we can see what's happening. So starting with our where, we use our where condition if not all the occurrences in the roster should be considered. So here's our household roster, and you can remember the problem we wanted to solve was to return the row code of the oldest female. That means that only females should be considered to our search, gender equals 2. So we'll start off with our linQ. The name of our roster in this example is household roster. Dot where, our operator here, and then we say where gender equals 2. So we'll be only considering these three cases in our example to our search. Our next function is order by, and this is just like a sort in Excel. So we can use the function order by to sort them in an ascending way, or we can use order by descending to specify that we're sorting in a descending order. And we specify which variable we want to consider. So in our example here, we're going to add to our linQ expression by adding a dot after the where function. And I'm going to use order by descending on the variable age. So I want to sort it from the oldest to the youngest. So we can see what's happened now. The household roster in our query has been sorted by age, but only our relevant gender, females, have been placed first because of our where condition. Order by descending puts those three cases in order, and it leaves our unselected occurrences, our males, unsorted at the bottom here. Next up, our function select to be added to our big line of code. And this specifies the variable we want to return. So we said at the start we wanted to get the row code of this oldest female. So again, we add it onto our big function using a full stop, select, and then specify that we're wanting to select the row code variable. And what this does is returns an array. So it takes all of our selected cases by where, our females, have already sorted it, but it would return an array like this. Now, an array is a series of numbers. We don't deal with it very much in survey solutions because we don't have a variable type of an array, and it's not that useful for survey programming usually. So our array would look like this: 3, 1, and 4. Now, our final function is called toArray, and what this one is going to do is to return just the occurrence that we want. So we add it on the end here. Looks like this: toArray, open close parenthesis, and then we have the square values here, and inside is the position in the array that we want to return. So an array always starts with the position 0. As we said, we don't have an array type variable in survey solutions. We'll be working with a long integer. So the 0 is telling us to send out our first number in the array, which is in fact number 3, the row code of the oldest female. So in the designer tool, we're here in lesson 4, and what we have in this lesson is a pretty simple parcel roster for an agricultural survey. So we have a triggering question for how many parcels there are, and then for each parcel we have a description, so a name for that parcel. We have some variables here that work out the area, though it's normalized in this variable here, the important one, the parcel in hectares. And then we have a variable for the use of the parcel. So after our roster is complete, I got down here some variables. First of all, where I'd like to hold the row code of the largest parcel. Next, the name of the parcel. And then presumably we'll have some further questions here, all asking about our largest parcel. So let's take a look through the code for our variable here to return the row code for whichever one of these parcels is the biggest. Now, I want to look through all of the parcels in my first example, so I don't need to use the where function. So I'm going to start here with the roster name, that's S2 parcel, and I'm going to order it by descending based upon this variable, the parcel size in hectares, so that we're comparing apples to apples. Once they're sorted from largest to smallest, I'm going to tell the query to select the row code. And then we use our toArray to send out the value of the first row code. So that's the simple example where there's no condition, but let's imagine that I want to find the largest parcel which is used for crops. So S2Q10 being equal to 1. So what we do here is add in at the start our where condition, where our x function S2 underscore Q10 is equal to 1. And then another dot. And this would have the functionality of only comparing the land parcels which are used for crops and returning the largest of those parcels, not the largest of all parcels. So that was our example of how to return a roster occurrence row code based on some previous answers which were input into the roster. Next up, we're going to take a look at how to return a value from a roster where we know the occurrence row code that we'd like to deal with. Now, we might know it because we've done a query like we did previously, or we might know it because it's always in a fixed position. Think the head of household always being input into the first row of a roster, which means we're always dealing with row code 0. So if we know the row code of the occurrence that we want to focus on, we can use a piece of code now to return some other values from within that occurrence. So the piece of code looks like this. We start with the roster name, and then we use these square brackets, and inside of those we put the occurrence number or the row code, and then a full stop and the variable value we'd like to return. So in our example we're looking at today with the oldest household female, it looks like this. The household roster is our roster name. Inside the square brackets goes the selected row code that we derived before, and the variable I'd like to return is the name of that household member. So our roster looks like this, and if you remember well before, selected row code is holding the number 3 in this example. So it's going to return from occurrence or row code number 3 the variable name, which is Mary. Now you might be wondering about this little piece of code which I've snuck in here, int in parentheses. Now the reason for this is that C# has 2 types of variables which can hold integers. These are called long and int. Essentially, long holds really big numbers and int holds slightly less big numbers. In Survey Solutions, our variable type only gives us a long to hold integers in. But some pieces of code require them to be formatted as an int. So all we do is put this int in parentheses before the variable, and it converts it for us from a long type integer to an integer. So it's just changing the variable type. It doesn't do anything. It still holds it as number 3. To demonstrate this in our designer example, I've got from earlier the variable which we know is a long integer holding the row code of the largest parcel from our S2 parcel roster. Now I've added a second variable where I'd like to hold the description. So that's this one here, the description of the largest parcel. So it's going to be a string type variable because it's going to be a piece of text. And what we do is we have our roster name, S2 parcel, and then within the square brackets, we have our largest row code. That's this variable here, which will hold the largest parcel's row code. And I'm using my little int here to convert largest row code from a long type integer, which is one of the ones Survey Solutions offers us, to a regular int type integer. And I have my full stop, and the variable that I want to return for this occurrence is the parcel description, this one here. So let's take a look at how this all works when we test it. To test this out, I've quickly set up 3 occurrences in our parcel roster. We've got first of all the front parcel, which is 2 hectares, the back parcel, which is 6 hectares, and the side parcel, which is 3 hectares. So I'd be expecting my functions now to return the row code and the description of the back parcel, being as it's the largest. So I put my piece of text here to test, and you can see, yes, it's returned row code number 1. Now remember, row code does start at 0, so this would be front is row code 0, back is row code 1, and it's extracted also the name back. So we'll double check it. Let's change the side parcel to 100 hectares. And we should now see that the side and row code 2 is what's being returned. So that's the end of our lesson for today. I know there was some difficult code and some new functions to get our heads around, but if you can master these 2 functions we've looked at today, it really will increase your programming power. Together, they'll allow you to return any variable from any occurrence in a non-fixed or a fixed roster, and based upon whatever conditions you like. There's heaps of functionality and uses for it, so take some time, get to learn it well, and it will really get you to being an advanced programmer. Thanks, and see you next lesson.